Good morning. How's everyone doing? Y'all good? 9:45. Did y'all get your coffee? Who drank coffee this morning? Anybody drink some coffee this morning? Y'all are 9:45 service. You've got to get your caffeine in the morning when you get here. You're going to be asleep no matter how loud we get. Like Chrissy said, my name is Johnny. I'm the family pastor at this campus, and I am wrapping up the last part of our series. But I wanted to share a quick story just to begin. When I was 20 years old, 10 years ago, that's right, 10 years ago. I'm 30 now, guys. You can start taking me seriously. No. My wife, okay, quick story. I'm going to rabbit trail for a second. When I turned 30, this is the difference between men and women. When I turned 30, my wife was like, oh, how's it feel? Like, you feel like you're getting old? And I was like, no. I'm welcoming my 30s. I'm glad I'm 30 years old because now there's things I want to do that people would be like, oh, he's in his 20s. So I'm welcoming my 30s. When she turned 30 is a very different story 3 weeks later. We're very close in age. It was not the same. That's the difference between men and women. But 10 years ago, I was 20, and I had a really good friend of mine named Russell we did all of our sports together. We hung out all the time together and grew up together through school. And he had this idea to go and watch an NBA basketball game. And I'd never been to a professional basketball game before, and there was a specific reason that he wanted to go see it. For a few years at that point, there was a very special player that started playing in the NBA. You might know him. His name's LeBron James. And, I don't really care for LeBron either, but because of how good he was, I was like, man, I do really want to go see him. Like, not everyone gets to say that, like, they saw him play. And so what we did, and this is why I don't go to professional sports at all anymore, was we got online, and I was like, I don't want, like, really cheap seats. I don't want to do that. I want to be able to actually see him. So we decided to pay an embarrassing amount of money. Anyone ever paid an embarrassing amount of money for something? Just be honest. We're in church. Anybody? There we go. All right. Yeah. We paid an embarrassing amount of money. I wasn't going to share. But I am going to share. It's $200 a ticket. That's what we paid. It was crazy. However, something else I didn't know until later, because I don't keep up with college basketball, and he was in college at the time, was I was sitting 2 people down from a guy named Steph Curry that I could have just, accidentally sat on his lap or something. I'm not sure what I would have done, and just said, no one has that story ever. But this is what happened. We get tickets to the Charlotte Bobcats Cleveland Cavaliers game, okay? Yeah, that's when Charlotte had a team called the Bobcats. And we decide, okay, we're going to hit the road. We're 2 20-year-olds. We haven't really traveled much ourselves. And this was before the age of digital GPS, all right? It wasn't quite the fold-out maps that fold out in like 30 different directions. You can never get them back together. But it was the days of Google Maps, all right, where everyone, anytime they traveled, they printed out Google Maps, which we did. We printed out our Google Maps. We had it stapled. We were ready to go. It's really not that hard to get to Charlotte, but we had a Google Maps thing, okay? And so it was me and Russell. We're in the car, and we're going. We look down, and he goes, all right, what's the next thing? And I look down and go, oh, man, we forgot our Google Maps sheet. We forgot it. So he reaches out behind me into the pocket of the seat and pulls out one of those maps. And he's like, well, let's just do this. And we're folding it open, and I was like, is this the right country? I don't know what this is. And so we finally, after about 10 minutes, find where we're at. And this is what happens. We see the thicker line of where to go to get to Charlotte, North Carolina. But I see a thinner line that looks like it would get us there faster. And I go, man, look at this line. I was like, this could do it right here. Like, we would save time if we just look about 10 miles down the road, get off the interstate, take a left, and we're just on that road until we hit Charlotte, North Carolina. So we do that, all right? And it takes about, 3 to 4 hours to get to Charlotte. I can't remember. I haven't driven there in a while. But it took us about 5 hours to to get to Charlotte that day. We started early because we wanted to like get there before anybody and be, you know, in the basketball arena and all this stuff. Really, we just got there on time for the game. But we went down this little line road, which looked very, very easy to go. But what ended up happening was we ended up going way up a mountain and like zigzag. You know the zigzag roads that say you can go 30 miles an hour, but you can't? Like there's no way to safely go 30 miles an hour on that road. Okay, we're going up this road, a 2-lane road. We haven't seen anybody in like 25, 30 minutes on this road. The only guy we saw, which I could tell by what he was doing because he was using the bathroom on the side of the road, that he hadn't seen anybody in a while either and was very surprised to see us drive by him. But we go all the way up to the top, and then what do? We go all the way to the bottom, and we finally get to Charlotte, North Carolina. I don't have to tell you that we didn't take that direction. We didn't go that way on the way back. We did end up sitting in some very good seats and saw LeBron James play, and it was awesome. But here's my point of this story, and maybe you can relate. Sometimes we're given simple instructions, but sometimes simple instructions almost feel like they're impossible to follow. Like we always feel like we have a better way to do something. We always feel like, you know what, I think I can do it better myself. I think I can do it better my way. I think, you know what, if we just look at this little line, look at this little red line, we can go off there. And oftentimes in life what happens is you end up down a path that you did not realize you were going to go down. You end up seeing things that you really wish you didn't see, and you end up going down directions in your life that you really wish you hadn't gone, and you wish you could go back and kind of redirect some things. And what we've been doing in this B series, and I'm going to put a list up in just a second, is you'll see that Paul, that wrote the book of Ephesians, has been taking us on this progression, kind of like a path. And this is what we've seen right here through the weeks. And you can go on northridgenetwork.com and catch up on the series. But every single week, this is what we've seen. We've seen that Jesus wants us to belong to him, to be truly loved by him, to believe in him, to become someone rooted in him, and obey him to find joy. That's what we've seen over the last several weeks through the B series. And this looks like something pretty simple to do, right? These are simple instructions. But sometimes, don't you feel like it's difficult to just belong to him? Like when you think of God, when you think of how amazing he is, if you're a Christ follower and you just think, man, he's amazing. Or maybe you're not a Christ follower and you think he's just like too amazing. Like what I hear about him, he's too holy or he's too perfect. That if he looked at my life, there's no way I can belong to him. There's no way I can just be truly loved by a God like that. There's no way that I can put my faith in him and what other people say about him or what the word says about him, because it can't work out that way. I don't know if he's ever seen my life or if he's looking at my life and all the stuff that I've said and done that I wish I could take back. There's no way that I can follow these simple instructions. I don't know about you, but I've felt like that for a number of years. And Paul's instructing his people to do this. And we found each of these ideas in the pages of his letter of Ephesians. Sometimes it works out fine when you take a different path, but oftentimes it works out where you're in somewhere where you didn't plan on going. And it's difficult sometimes to follow simple instructions. And Paul in Ephesians 6, which is where we're at today, gives us an idea of why it's so difficult. Why is it so difficult? Because we feel like, you know, the thoughts that I just said to you that we battle with every day, insecurities, worry, shame, those things, they come out in our feelings and in our thoughts. And Paul lets us know in Ephesians 6 why that happens. So if you're in Ephesians 6, we're going to start at verse 10. And he's trying to, and this is our B phrase right at the very beginning, he's trying to encourage the church in Ephesus. And I think he's trying to encourage us too. In verse 10, he says, finally. So after all these other things, finally, be strong in the Lord and his mighty power. Be strong in the Lord and his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Paul's trying to let the people of Ephesians in on something. And I love that he points this out. He says, this life, it's not easy. And I think we all know that. This life isn't easy. There's valleys. We're on mountaintops sometimes, but a lot of times we're in valleys of our life. And he wants us to know that in those times where you feel like there's an enemy in your life, your enemy with flesh and blood. It's not with flesh and blood. He says there is someone coming against you. There's a reason why all those be phrases are difficult to follow, even though they sound simple, just a few words, right? There's a reason why that is, and that's because you actually have a real enemy. Not a person in your life, not your boss or your spouse. You actually have a supernatural enemy that the Bible says wants to steal, kill, and destroy. That he's literally coming after you and I. He tells us to be strong, and it sounds easy, which it's not, but he didn't stop there, and I'm glad he didn't. He kept going. He said, be strong in the Lord and his mighty work. Paul knows that in this life, this life is more than our limited strength can handle. It's more than my limited strength can handle. My strength will eventually run out. My emotional strength and physical strength will eventually run out, and it can't compete with the stuff that the enemy comes and tries to throw our way. He knows you're going to get hit with life circumstances, deep valleys of life, things that make you feel like you're in a battle. In other words, and this is in your listening guide, living a life passionately following Jesus isn't a playground. It's a battleground. It's a battleground. It's not easy. I guarantee you, because there's people in this church, I know this, you're sitting here, you've never fully committed your life to Jesus, and you see the people around you that have, and you think, man, why does it come so easy for them? I guarantee you, they're somewhere either early in the morning or late at night, and they're preparing for battle. That's what they're doing. That's why it looks easy, maybe on the outside, for them to have such a faith that you admire and that you wish you could have, because they're preparing. Because it's not, following Jesus is not a playground. It is a battleground that Paul's saying, look, you've got to prepare. You've got to get ready, or you're not going to make it, because he says the devil is literally scheming after you. Like, that is your enemy. Not the people around you, not the people that you feel like are against you. That's not your enemy. That's not the person at work trying to outwork you. That's not your enemy. Your enemy in that situation is literally a supernatural enemy telling you that you should have everything first. Or that supernatural enemy, Satan, telling you that why should they get what you deserve? That's your enemy. Using your own feelings and thoughts against you. Your enemy is not flesh and blood. That's why in verse 12, he's saying, your battle isn't with other people. Christ wants them to become someone rooted in them too. Your battle is with the supernatural enemy. And that's what he says when he says devil schemes and heavenly realms. Satan's a real enemy that battles us within our flesh and within our thoughts as we try to become someone that Jesus wants us to become. But I want to reiterate that it's not with flesh and blood. It's not with someone that's done something to wrong you. It's not. There's people in your life, just like I have, that sometimes will withhold forgiveness from, and will think, man, I can't just simply forgive them because what they did was too bad. What they did was too horrible. So I can't just simply say, it's okay. It's forgiven. It's done. Your enemy is not with that person. Your enemy is with the supernatural enemy telling you what they did was too bad. You can't simply forgive them. Which honestly actually just robs you of joy at that point. It robs you of joy. It's not with flesh and blood. It's not with other people. Your battle's not with people that don't have much in this life. But then you also, and I've been there, you also don't think that they deserve much because of whatever decisions that they've made. That's not your battle. Your battle is with Satan telling you through your thoughts and through your flesh that what you have and what you've worked for is yours because you worked for it. that you should be able to enjoy it and not have to give it away and not feel guilty about helping other people. That's the enemy speaking into your life. But it comes in, a lot of times in my head, and it'll do the same with you, it comes through a voice that sounds a lot like mine. It comes in my thoughts and feelings that sound a lot like me. So he disguises himself, and I don't hear him the way that he really sounds. That's my real enemy. It's not with other people, because Jesus wants other people to come to know him. This is where the enemy will attack. He'll attack your faith when it's weak. And Paul knew this, because if you keep reading in verse 13, this is what he says, and I don't have it up there, but I have verse 16 up there. We're going to kind of concentrate on this, but I'll read it really quickly. Therefore, put on the full armor of God, so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground. And after you have done everything to stand, stand firm then, with the belt of truth buckled around your waist, with the breastplate of righteousness in place, and with your feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. And this is what it says in verse 16, because I want to focus in on who your real enemy is and who God's saying, I want you to be strong, and this is how you're going to do it. In addition to all this, take up the shield of faith with which you can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. All the flaming arrows of the evil one. Take up the shield of faith. When I was little, I shared this with our volunteers earlier. When I was little, I had this little Captain America plastic shield and at home. And I didn't realize how small that shield was until I saw it after I'd already moved out and came back home. And it had I thought it had been thrown away years ago. And it came out while my mom was moving some stuff. And I saw it and realized how small it was. And I started thinking about that when I was reading this. I started thinking that was my shield when I was younger. My shield when I was younger, I didn't have everything. You could probably attest to this. You don't have all of the valleys of life and all of the hardships and life circumstances when you're about 6, 7, 8 years old. But as you get older, your shield needs to get bigger. Your shield you need an adult shield. And what I mean by that is God has this system of protecting you. And in this particular case, when it comes to what the Bible calls the evil one, that system is called faith. It's called faith. The bottom line for today is to be strong against our real enemy, we must have faith in who Jesus says he is. We must have faith in who Jesus says he is. Jesus has already beaten the enemy in every way and says that he can do the same in and through us while we're battling through life. So all we have to do, Jesus stays the same. All we have to do is actually have faith in who he is and what he's done. He's defeated every Goliath in your life already. The anxiety that you're dealing with, the worry that you've dealt with, the shame, he's already defeated all of those things. It's really just believing that Jesus is who he said he is and that he's big enough to do what he said he'll do. He's already done all of that. But it's taking up our shield of faith. It's taking up our shield of faith. I started thinking when I was thinking about this word faith, and there was a story. Paul wrote this around 60 AD, and a few years right before that, there was a guy named Matthew writing what we call the book of Matthew. And in that book, in Matthew 14, I don't have it up on the screen, but you can read it. There's a couple of stories that are put together, and you know these stories. Just hang with me. I'm just going to summarize these stories. But Jesus talks about faith, specifically small faith, in one of these stories. And the first story goes like this. Him and his disciples are on the mountainside, and they're feeding thousands of people. They're trying to figure out how to feed thousands of people. And they go, well, what do we have? And this little boy goes, hey, I got a lunch, with some fish and some bread. And he was like, well, let's break it up. And so he feeds 5,000 people with very little bits of food. It was a miracle, and they broke it up, gave everyone food, and then had leftovers, specifically 12 baskets of leftovers, which I never really thought was that specific or that special until I started thinking about this through the context of faith. Because then, and I never noticed this word, it says immediately, Jesus told them to pick up the baskets and get on the boat and go to the other side. So that's kind of the end of the first story. We go to the second story, but oftentimes in the Bible, it's hard to realize the time between two different stories because we're reading it and we're not sure if there's a day in between, a month in between, a couple of weeks in between. But he says immediately, he said, pick up the baskets, get in the boat, go to the other side. So he goes on the mountaintop. He's going to pray. It's nighttime. The disciples are out on the boat, and what happens? The waves begin to roar. The storm comes. They're being thrown around on the sea, and they're afraid. They think they're going to die. And Jesus knows this, and he's going to go out to them by foot on water, by the way, which is kind of crazy. But and they think when they see him, they call him a ghost. They're like, is that a ghost? Like they don't even recognize him, even though they were with him, 10 hours earlier, 9 hours earlier. I'm not sure of the exact time, but it wasn't very long. He said immediately. So it wasn't very long before that they were with him. And then real quick, it was kind of cool, but Peter was like, well, Jesus, if that's you, let me come out to you. And he goes, come on. And he made a couple steps, looked away from Jesus, started to drown. They pulled him up. Jesus got in the boat, and he says, why do you guys doubt? You of little faith. Why do you doubt? And this is why I think this is so cool. I never noticed it. He said, if you remember correctly, I want you to pick up the 12 baskets, and I want you to immediately get in the boat and go to the other side. Where do you think those 12 baskets ended up? They ended up on the boat. Think about this. If they followed his instructions correctly, they ended up right there with him. And if they didn't, because it doesn't say that in Scripture, but I'm picturing this. If they didn't, it said that everyone ate the day before. Everyone ate of the fish and of the loaves of bread. Everyone had a meal. Everyone experienced who Jesus was. Everyone experienced the miracle of breaking up the food and seeing how he did that. And I only picture this right here. And this is how my mind works. When Jesus walks up on the boat, he's walking by the evidence of who Jesus is already and says, why do you doubt? You of little faith, did you not see what I just did just a few minutes ago? Did you not see what I did for dinner last night? You were there, and I told you to get on the boat. And right now, you literally have the evidence of who I am in your stomach, and you have it sitting around you. You have the evidence of who Jesus is all around them right now. They've experienced him, and the moment life circumstances came in, the moment they thought their life was on the line, they didn't even recognize him when he was on the water. And I can't help but think, how many people have all the evidence of who Jesus is around them, but you just don't see it. You don't see what's in your basket. You don't see the stuff that, I'll tell you one quick example of this. When I began to realize how much God has blessed me and the stuff in my basket, that was whenever I began becoming the person Jesus wanted me to become. Early on in my marriage, I wasn't the husband that I should have been, and I knew it. I started praying. I was like, God, make me the husband that you want me to be. I need to change some things. I was selfish, and I need to change some things. And I realized this, it was so cool. God started making evident what was in my basket. When I wanted to become a better husband, he started making me realize how great my wife was. And I was like, man, once I figured out how great my wife was, it was actually pretty easy to become a better husband. It wasn't that hard at that point. But I didn't realize that the evidence of who Jesus is was sitting all around me. The blessings of him and the miracles that he works out was sitting all around me. And that's what the disciples, I wonder if they just looked down in their baskets. I want you to find two people and just say, look in your basket. Just find two people right now and just say, look in your basket. Because this is what I want to say. In your basket, there are blessings and stuff that you have forgotten to say, thank you, God, for those blessings. You have forgotten, and that's okay. We all do it. But I want to bring that to the surface because that is a key component in you allowing your faith to grow strong. When your faith grows strong, you're going to be able to stand against a supernatural enemy that you would not be able to stand against otherwise. Look at what is in your basket. Look down. If the disciples just would have looked down, they would have realized that the storm that was in front of them, Jesus called them to this. he would have seen them through it. Okay? If they would have just looked down or just even thought about how full their bellies were at that point, they would have just been like, wait a second. Jesus was the one that told us to come here. He's going to see us through this. He's going to see us through this. And they would not have had the little faith that Jesus was talking about. This is what's in your notes. The evidence of who he is in what you've already seen him do. It's in what you've already seen him do. Some of you've seen your marriage take a complete U-turn because of what Jesus has done. Don't forget that. Some of you've seen the ability to bounce back from an addiction. Okay, listen, some people, you forgot to credit that to God. He's okay with that, but he wants you to do it now. He wants you to turn to him and go, God, I couldn't have done that without your power. I couldn't have done that without your power. I was watching TV the other day, and I saw a commercial, and this is kind of how we treat it sometimes. And I've done this. I've been guilty of this. But there was a commercial, and there was a guy praying. It's not a Christian TV show or anything, so it's satire. But there was a guy praying, and he was praying for a specific thing to happen, and it happened right after he prayed for it. But right after it happened, he looked up and goes, "Oh, never mind. I don't need you, God." But listen. Sometimes some things will happen in our lives. The blessings will happen in our lives, and we forget to credit God for them. That happens. But your faith won't grow in the process of you doing that. And if we need a large shield of faith to be able to stand in this world against a supernatural enemy, to extinguish all the arrows that he shoots at us, we're going to need to remember what God has done in our lives to be able to move forward. The evidence is in what he's already done. When you realize that, then when, not if, the battle of the enemy comes, all you have to do is cling to who he is, and that's evident in what he's already done, because your faith is not in a boat. Your faith was not in the boat. Their faith was not in a small packed lunch, a few hours before that. Their faith was in a person named Jesus that will walk with you, that wants to have a relationship with you, that wants to be the one that is helping you grow your faith. If you're one of those people that thinks, man, everyone has a stronger faith than me, then I'm telling you, think about the things that he's blessed you with. And if you think, I'm not sure what he's blessed me with, some people are like this. I was talking to one of my students about a year ago, and I just started rattling off all the crazy scientific miracles that are out there. And I started thinking about this yesterday, too, because I was talking to my wife about how, this is weird, but how we, digest food and stuff like that. And I was thinking, man, our bodies just literally take in food and only take what it needs and then takes out the rest. And I'm like, that's a miracle all in and of itself. And when you think about the abstract, amazing creation that is around us, it's evident in what he's already done. It's evident in what he's already done. Our faith isn't in the boat. It's not in the food. It's in a person. It's in Jesus. And Paul wants to tell you, be strong in him. Be strong in the Lord, in his mighty hand, and his work. And when the enemy attacks, and he will, make sure you've been building your faith, getting ready for the battle. Getting ready for the battle. If you're someone that always gives, whether it's resources, whether it's time, listen, I'm going to talk to you specifically for just a second. The enemy will come after you time and time again. Because the enemy doesn't take out the bench player. The enemy will target the one that's making a difference and will come at you hard. And I would even say this, and this convicted me because I heard someone say something like this, and it convicted me years ago. But if you're not feeling somewhat attacked by a supernatural enemy, you might want to take a look at your life and see if you're making a difference. Because if you're not making a difference, he'll look at you and be like, "You're doing a good job on your own. I'm just going to go to the next person." I'm serious. That may rub someone the wrong way, but I had to look at my own life and be like, man, I need to change some things so that my faith will grow strong, because I'm not even feeling it because I'm not doing anything. I'm not doing anything. I'm not allowing Jesus to live through me. So there's no reason for me to feel attacked. There's no reason for me to feel, I was feeling fine in my selfish ways because I was getting everything I wanted. Once I started changing some things, because I realized I wasn't becoming the person that Jesus wanted me to become, once I started changing some things, I started feeling those attacks. And I needed to realize how to build my faith. And I'm going to give you, this is in your your guide, 3 next steps to build your faith. And I realize that it says 2. All right, for all you people that are like me, that I'd be like, it says 2 next steps. I caught it late, so it was a typo. I'm going to give you 3 next steps of how to build your faith. Number 1, pray for God to build your faith, because really he's the one that's going to do it. Pray for him to build your faith. Remember, we want to operate in his strength, not our own strength. And I wrote this down later. I wrote more time spent with God, and I shared this already, more time spent with him, more time that he will make it evident what's already in your basket. When you realize all the things that he's already given you, all the provision, all the promise, all the things that he's put in front of your life, that will build your faith. Pray that God will build your faith. Number 2, constantly remind yourself of what Jesus has already done in your life. This will help you remember that Jesus has come through before and he's the same now as he was then. I can only imagine what Jesus is thinking when he was on the boat right after he fed thousands and thousands and thousands of people. Like, do you remember what I did? It wasn't that long ago. Do you remember the other miracle before that? It wasn't that long ago. The same Jesus that took you from whatever it is at one point in your life to where you are now is the same Jesus that when you face something in the future can help you then. He can help you then. Constantly remind yourself of what Jesus has already done in your life. Any encounter that you have with Jesus, it could be small. It could be, I was at a conference thing a couple days ago, and there was a friend of mine there, and I realized, like I was just sitting there, I was running media for them, and he was sitting next to me, and I didn't realize the encounter that he was having at the time, because he's going through a lot, and it was just like an hour worth of time. But any encounter you have with Jesus, cling to that. Remember that. It may be someone that prayed for you. It may be a text message. It may be something that you heard on a podcast from a speaker or from a teacher or something like that. Any encounter that you feel like that Jesus has, cling to that. Cling to that. Remember that. Remind yourself of those things. Remind yourself of any encounter that you've had with Jesus. Number 3, read his word and know it wherever you go. Read his word and know it wherever you go. So a couple weeks ago, I got the opportunity to be a counselor at Camp ACC, and I didn't give my life to Christ until I was 17 years old. So I skipped all the VBSs, I skipped all the kids' camps, I skipped all of that. So honestly, I didn't do any flannel graphs or anything like that when I was younger. Flannel graphs, we miss them. But I didn't do any of that. So when I was in Bible college, I'm just saying, some of the times it was the first time, being honest, it was the first time I was hearing these stories. I was like, man, that's an awesome story. But that's where I was. I got into Bible college when I was like 20, 21 years old. I'd been a Christian for like 3 or 4 years. I was concentrating mainly on who Jesus was for that time, and that was it. And so I heard a lot of the Old Testament stories. But then at camp, they're singing these songs, and everyone knows these songs. I don't know these songs, and I'm one of the counselors. But they're singing this song, Romans 16:19 says. And you've probably heard it's like, Roman, what? 16, wow. What? Yeah, 19 says, say what? I'm not going to sing the rest of it to you guys. But my oldest child, Ella, she's learning this song, and the song actually says, it talks about the enemy. Romans 16:20 actually is. But that part talks about the enemy. And it says that God will crush the enemy under your feet. He'll crush the enemy, not under his feet, under your feet. That's what I'm saying. Jesus wants you to become someone so that when the enemy comes, you can crush him under your feet. My child at 9 years old is learning that there's an enemy. that's going to come after her. But God has the ability to work through her to where she crushes him under her feet. If you don't know some scripture, you don't have to know all the scripture. You don't have to know all the Bible. It'd be great if you did, but you don't have to. But that's a great one to know. If you don't know some things, if you don't know that you're the head and not the tail, that you're a son or daughter of Jesus, if you don't know that you're made into a masterpiece, knitted in your mother's womb, if you don't know that you're more than a conqueror, I'm telling you, if you know those passages, any situation that you walk into, any storm that comes at you, you're going to be able to stand because you're going to be able to know that there's a Jesus that is bigger than anything else in the world that's inside of you. You're going to know those things, but you discount yourself when you don't know them. You discount yourself when you don't know them because you're just like, well, I go to church and I read some things. I read the stuff on the screen and that stuff's really good and that's awesome. Do those things. But when you're in the circumstances of life, when the storm is hitting you and your boat's rocking and stuff like that, you're going to need to know some stuff that Jesus wants you to be grounded in. And so know your word, read his word and know it wherever you go. I'm going to invite the band back up, but I want to finish with Paul's thoughts on what he gives us, what Jesus gives us to help you in the battle. Look at verse 17, Ephesians 6, verse 17. He says, take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. Take the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. And this is what stood out to me. Every piece of armor that he listed in Ephesians 6, 10 through 17 is a defensive piece except for one, and that's his word. That's the only offensive piece of armor that he says, you got a shield, you got your shoes so you can run away, I'm just kidding. You have a shield, you got a belt, you got a helmet, okay? So you're ready to get hit. But take up the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. Know his promises, know his provisions, know what he has for you. I was reading, this is a few years ago, a book by a guy named Erwin McManus, and he's a pastor, and he has a young son. This is kind of a fun. He has a young son and like 7 years old, and he was asking him to go to summer camp. And so he was doing his research on summer camps, and he was like, well, I don't want to send him to a summer camp that's not a Christian summer camp, because what do they tell at summer camps around campfires? Anybody? Ghost stories. They tell ghost stories. And he was like, I don't want my son being super scared, not being able to sleep at night and having to keep the light on and stuff like that. I just don't want that happening. So he was like, I'm going to send him to a Christian summer camp. So he sent him to a Christian summer camp, and his son came back. He's like, how was it? And he was like, Daddy, they told me stories of demons and Satan. And he was like, oh gosh. And so he couldn't sleep at night. He wanted the light on. He got the biggest nightlight he could. I'm just making that part up. I don't know if he did that, but I would. That's what I had to do when my kid couldn't do that. But he couldn't sleep at night, and he wanted his dad to stay in the room with him. And his dad didn't know what to do. And he was just like, man, I don't know what to do. He goes, man, I'm going to pray for you. So he prayed for him. But he didn't know what to pray. And so he prayed this, and I thought, he said that he just prayed the first thing that came to his mind. And he said, God, make my son dangerous to the enemy. Make my son dangerous to the enemy. So that wherever he walks, the enemy has to leave. Whatever situation comes his way, the enemy has to get out of it. My question for you, church, is are you dangerous to the enemy? Are you being in Christ in such a way that the enemy has to leave when you walk into the room? And if you're not, you're discounting your life. And I promise you this, because I know what some of you are thinking, that I don't know everything in your life, and I don't. And right now, you may be in the lowest part you've ever felt. But I promise you this, your circumstances change, which unfortunately have the ability to change the size of your faith, but God doesn't change. He's the same. and he's good. In every situation, he is good, even though our situations aren't always good and our circumstances aren't always good, but he is good. Sometimes, stand with me, church, because we're about to worship in just a second, but sometimes I want you to just close your eyes. You just gotta say those words. You are good. You are good. Say those words. It could be in your own mind. It could be in your